During the tough years of the Great Depression, breakfast wasn't just the first meal of the day. It was a lifeline. Families stretched every ingredient, turning the simplest staples into nourishing, hearty meals that kept hope alive. Today, we're diving into 30 frugal breakfasts, born from that grit and ingenuity. Recipes that still bring warmth, comfort, and clever simplicity to our tables, proving that good food doesn't have to be expensive. Let's honor the resourceful cooks of the past and discover how their humble breakfasts can brighten our mornings today. Skillet cornbread with molasses drizzle. There's something wonderfully homespun about cornbread sizzling in a cast-iron skillet, the edges crisping to a warm golden brown, the air filling with the earthy, slightly sweet scent of toasted cornmeal. In the 1930s, cornbread wasn't just a side dish. It was a staple that stretched meager rations into something hearty and satisfying. Cornmeal was cheap, plentiful, and forgiving, making it the perfect canvas for Depression-era cooks who had to make every penny and every bite count. The trick was a little molasses, that sticky, dark syrup that added a deep, almost smoky sweetness to the simple bread, turning it into a humble celebration. The ingredients themselves tell a story: coarse cornmeal, often stone-ground and rustic, paired with buttermilk or soured milk to give the bread a gentle tang and tender crumb. Baking soda helped it rise, and just a pinch of salt rounded out the flavor. Back then, buttermilk was often homemade or left over from butter making, a precious kitchen resource, and molasses was a cheaper alternative to refined sugar, a pantry favorite. To make this skillet cornbread, you start by whisking together the dry cornmeal, baking soda, and salt in a bowl. Then, you mix in the buttermilk slowly, watching the batter thicken into a creamy, grainy consistency. A hot, greased cast-iron skillet is key. It gives the bread a crispy crust that contrasts beautifully with the soft, crumbly inside. Pour the batter into the skillet and bake it until the edges are browned and a toothpick comes out clean. When it's fresh from the oven, the cornbread is ready for its finishing touch, a generous drizzle of warm molasses. That slow, glossy stream soaks into the bread's nooks and crannies, adding a rich, bittersweet note that lingers on the tongue. Eating this cornbread is like tasting history itself, simple, honest, and full of heart, just like the families who relied on it during tough times. Depression-era oatmeal with dried apples. Oatmeal was a trusted friend during the Great Depression, a humble bowl of warmth and nourishment that cost next to nothing but delivered plenty of comfort. It was a blank canvas for frugal cooks who learned to stretch limited resources into something satisfying and wholesome. Adding dried apples, which were often preserved from the summer harvest or traded at local markets, gave oatmeal a little spark of sweetness and texture, turning a plain porridge into a gentle morning treat. Picture a modest kitchen in the 1930s, where dried apples hung in strings or sat packed in jars, ready to be rehydrated and transformed. Oats themselves were inexpensive, shelf-stable, and filling, their hearty grains slowly swelling into a creamy porridge when simmered gently in water or milk. Dried apples brought bursts of tartness and chewiness, a little nod to nature's bounty even in hard times. To prepare this breakfast, rolled oats are simmered slowly in water or milk, coaxing out their creamy, soothing texture. While the oats cook, dried apples are soaked briefly in warm water to soften their bite without losing their tang. Once the oatmeal thickens and the apples are plump, they're stirred in together, creating a blend of soft grains and tender fruit. A pinch of salt sharpens the flavors, while a touch of brown sugar or molasses, if available, adds a whisper of sweetness. The final bowl is simple but deeply satisfying, a steaming spoonful of creamy oats flecked with soft, tart apple pieces. The cinnamon or nutmeg some cooks added was a luxury, but the oats and dried apples alone told a story of making do and finding small joys in everyday food. This Depression-era oatmeal still holds up today, offering a nourishing, wallet-friendly start that comforts like a warm hug on a chilly morning. Soda biscuits with lard and honey. When there wasn't time, or yeast, to wait for dough to rise, soda biscuits became a Depression-era lifesaver. These quick, tender biscuits relied on baking soda and buttermilk to puff up with minimal effort, and lard, yes, rendered pig fat, gave them a flaky, melt-in-your-mouth texture that stretched modest ingredients into something satisfying and special. Served with a drizzle of honey or homemade preserves, these biscuits brought a touch of sweetness to tough mornings. The ingredients were simple pantry staples: flour, a pinch of baking soda for lift, salt for flavor, cold lard for richness, and buttermilk to bind everything together. Back then, lard was prized not only for cooking, but also because it was inexpensive and readily available on farms or through local trades. Buttermilk, often the byproduct of butter making, added a gentle tang and tender crumb to the dough. To make these biscuits, the dry ingredients are sifted together, then the cold lard is cut or rubbed in with your fingers until the mixture resembles coarse crumbs. This crumbly texture is key. It's what creates the biscuit's flaky layers. Next, the buttermilk is poured in gently, and the dough is brought together carefully, just until it holds. Overworking it would toughen these little wonders. The dough is rolled or patted into a thick slab and cut into rounds with a floured glass or cutter. Then it's baked in a hot oven until puffed and golden, with crisp edges that beg to be split open. The best part? Slathering warm biscuits with a drizzle of honey or spoonful of preserves, the sweetness balancing the biscuit's tender, buttery richness. These soda biscuits were a Depression kitchen's quiet triumph, fast, affordable, and comforting. They remind us that even in hard times, a little ingenuity and simple ingredients could turn a humble breakfast into a moment of pure, flaky joy. Skim milk porridge with cinnamon and raisins. In the lean years of the Great Depression, porridge was more than just a humble breakfast. It was a warm embrace against cold mornings and empty cupboards. Made with cracked wheat or farina and cooked gently in skim milk, this porridge was creamy and filling without relying on costly ingredients like cream or eggs. The addition of raisins and a sprinkle of cinnamon transformed the simple dish into a comforting treat that lifted spirits and stretched supplies. Skim milk, often saved from a family's meager dairy ration, provided just enough richness to make the grains soft and luscious, while cracked wheat or farina, coarse, inexpensive cereals, added hearty texture and slow-release energy. Raisins, preserved fruit from better times or traded at the market, brought bursts of sweetness and chewiness, a tiny luxury in a breakfast bowl. Cinnamon, when available, lent a warm, fragrant spice that made each spoonful feel like a celebration. To prepare this porridge, the cracked wheat or farina is simmered slowly in skim milk with a pinch of salt, stirring frequently to coax out its creamy texture without lumps. As the grains swell and thicken, the raisins are folded in, softening as they soak up the milk's warmth. A dusting of cinnamon is added near the end, its aroma filling the kitchen and hinting at sweetness without adding sugar. Served steaming hot, this porridge was the morning anchor for many Depression families. Simple, affordable, and deeply satisfying. It nourished both body and soul, proving that even the plainest ingredients, when prepared with care, could become a meal worth waking up for. Today, this recipe remains a cozy, wallet-friendly breakfast that invites us to slow down, savor warmth, and appreciate the quiet comforts of a simpler time. Fried potatoes and onions. Few breakfasts during the Great Depression were as straightforward and as satisfying as a skillet of fried potatoes and onions. When fresh vegetables were scarce and money tighter than a drum, potatoes were a reliable, filling staple that could be stretched across many mouths. Add onions, which were cheap and lasted well in root cellars, and you had a simple dish that transformed humble ingredients into golden, crispy comfort. Back then, cooking fat often came from rendered lard or drippings saved from the family's meat scraps. Nothing went to waste. Potatoes, sliced thin or chopped into small pieces, were fried slowly in this fat until their edges curled into crispy, caramelized morsels. Onions, sliced thin, softened, and sweetened as they cooked alongside the potatoes, adding layers of flavor without a penny of extra cost. To make this breakfast, peeled potatoes are cut into even slices or cubes and tossed into a hot skillet with a generous spoonful of fat. Onions are added shortly after, cooking together slowly over medium heat so the potatoes crisp without burning and the onions turn translucent and golden. Salt and pepper, if available, season the dish simply, allowing the natural sweetness of the onions and earthiness of the potatoes to shine. This meal was more than a breakfast. It was a way to fuel up for a hard day's work with inexpensive, accessible ingredients. Its aroma, the faint sweetness of caramelized onions mingling with toasty potatoes, was a morning ritual in many Depression-era homes. Today, fried potatoes and onions still stand as a testament to frugality and flavor, proving that sometimes the simplest things, cooked with care, can become a beloved classic. Cream chipped beef on toast. Cream chipped beef on toast, a mouthful of a name but a Depression-era breakfast classic that turned a little dried beef into something rich and satisfying. This dish was a clever way to stretch scarce protein, transforming thin slices of salted, dried beef into a creamy, peppery gravy spooned generously over toasted bread. It was frugal, filling, and a beloved comfort food in kitchens where every scrap counted. Dried beef, sometimes called SOS in more playful or desperate circles, was often sold in thin, salty strips that could last months in a pantry. During the Depression, families learned to make these modest slices into a sauce with just a few staple ingredients: butter or drippings, flour for thickening, milk, and plenty of black pepper to cut through the richness. The toast underneath soaked up the sauce, making each bite a blend of crunchy and creamy textures. To prepare cream chipped beef, you start by melting butter in a skillet, then whisking in flour to form a roux, a thick paste that's the base for the sauce. Slowly, milk is added, stirring constantly to prevent lumps until the mixture thickens into a smooth, velvety gravy. The dried beef is chopped finely and stirred in, releasing its salty punch. Black pepper is added liberally, giving the sauce a sharp warmth that wakes up the palate. Meanwhile, slices of bread, often homemade or leftover from the day before, are toasted to a golden crisp. The thick, creamy chipped beef sauce is ladled over the toast, creating a hearty, savory breakfast that could quiet rumbling stomachs without costing much. This dish was a Depression kitchen's triumph, using small amounts of preserved meat and pantry staples to create a meal that felt indulgent but was modest. Today, cream chipped beef on toast remains a nostalgic favorite, a reminder that ingenuity and a few simple ingredients can turn even the leanest times into moments of comfort and fullness. Depression era. Apple fritters. Apple fritters were a little golden treasure in Depression-era kitchens, simple, sweet, and made from ingredients that were often on hand or easily salvaged. When fresh fruit was a luxury, dried or leftover apples could be transformed into these delightful fried cakes, bringing a touch of sweetness and warmth to a frugal breakfast table. Fritters were a way to make something special out of scraps, and their crispy edges and tender, fruity centers offered a comforting contrast that brightened hard days. The magic started with apples, often dried, but sometimes fresh or even canned if luck allowed. These apples were chopped into small pieces and folded into a simple batter made of flour, baking powder, a pinch of salt, and a little sugar to balance the tartness. Milk or water was added to create a thick batter that would hold the apple bits together when fried. A small amount of fat, usually lard or rendered grease, was heated in a skillet, ready to transform spoonfuls of batter into golden discs. Cooking the fritters required patience and care. The batter, studded with apple pieces, was dropped by spoonfuls into hot fat, where they sizzled and puffed up. The edges turned crisp and caramelized, while the interior remained tender and moist. Fried to a perfect golden brown, these fritters were then lifted out and drained on paper or cloth to soak up any excess grease. Often, they were dusted with sugar or drizzled with molasses or syrup, sweet touches that were a rare treat during the Depression but made the fritters feel festive. For many families, apple fritters were a way to celebrate the bounty of fall or to rescue fruit that might otherwise go to waste. Their aroma, warm cinnamon, caramelized apple, and frying dough, filled kitchens with a sense of comfort and small joys. Though born from necessity, apple fritters have stood the test of time. Today, they remain a beloved breakfast or snack, reminding us that even in tough times, a little creativity and simple ingredients can turn humble food into something memorable and heartwarming. Whether served with a cup of strong coffee or enjoyed as a sweet morning pick-me-up, these fritters carry the flavor of resilience and the sweetness of shared family moments. Cornmeal mush with syrup. Cornmeal mush was a Depression-era breakfast staple that filled bellies and warmed spirits without emptying pockets. Thick, creamy, and comforting, this simple dish was made from the cheapest of ingredients, plain cornmeal cooked slowly in water or milk until it thickened to a custard-like consistency. It was a breakfast born from necessity but perfected through patience and tradition. During the Depression, cornmeal was a pantry hero, affordable, shelf-stable, and versatile. Many families relied on it as a base for numerous meals, but cornmeal mush held a special place at the breakfast table. It was easy to prepare in big batches, stretched out to feed hungry mouths, and could be topped with whatever sweeteners were on hand, usually molasses or a drizzle of syrup made from local cane or sorghum. To make cornmeal mush, The process began by bringing water or milk to a gentle boil in a heavy pot. Slowly, cornmeal was whisked in, careful to avoid lumps. The mixture was then stirred constantly over low heat, coaxing the grains to swell and thicken into a creamy, porridge-like consistency. This slow cooking was essential. It prevented burning and allowed the natural sweetness and corn flavor to develop fully. Once thickened, the mush could be poured into a dish or individual bowls to cool slightly, setting up firm enough to slice if desired. When served warm, cornmeal mush was often drizzled with molasses or syrup, adding a rich, bittersweet note that paired beautifully with the subtle corn flavor. Some families might spread a pat of butter for extra richness, but even plain, it was hearty and satisfying. In Depression kitchens, cornmeal mush wasn't just breakfast. It was a humble reminder of making do with what you had, a dish that sustained generations through lean times. Today, it offers a nostalgic taste of the past and a wholesome, budget-friendly option for modern mornings. Whether spooned hot from the pot or sliced and fried for a crispy twist, cornmeal mush is a testament to the simple, enduring pleasures of frugal cooking. Depression, bean soup with toast. During the Great Depression, when money was scarce and hunger loomed large, bean soup became a cornerstone of frugal breakfasts across America. It was more than just a dish. It was a symbol of thrift, sustenance, and the ingenuity of families who turned humble dried beans into a hearty, nourishing meal that could keep bodies fueled through the toughest days. Beans, inexpensive and protein-packed, were a pantry staple, and transforming them into a thick soup was a way to stretch limited resources while still enjoying a warm, comforting start to the day. The beauty of Depression bean soup was in its simplicity and adaptability. Families used whatever dried beans were available: navy beans, pinto beans, or Great Northern beans, all easy to store and cheap to buy in bulk. These beans, soaked overnight to soften, were then simmered gently with water or a modest broth made from vegetable scraps, bones, or a bit of salted meat if fortunate enough to have it. Onions and carrots, which were among the few vegetables that stored well in root cellars, were diced finely and added to build flavor and nutrition. To prepare the soup, soaked beans were placed in a large pot with fresh water or broth and brought to a slow simmer. The key was patience. The beans needed to cook for hours until they became tender and began to break down, thickening the soup naturally. Meanwhile, chopped onions and carrots were sautéed gently in a bit of fat or oil, then stirred into the simmering pot. Salt and pepper, used sparingly, enhanced the flavors without overwhelming the modest ingredients. The final result was a thick, creamy soup dotted with soft beans and tender vegetables, a bowl that felt like a warm hug on a cold morning. Thick enough to spoon, it was often served with toasted bread or simple homemade biscuits, perfect for dipping and soaking up the flavorful broth. The toast was usually day-old bread, sliced thin and toasted over a fire or stove until crisp, giving a pleasant textural contrast to the soft, hearty soup. Bean soup was beloved because it combined nutrition, economy, and comfort. It provided protein and fiber to sustain families with little more than dried beans and leftover scraps, showcasing Depression-era resourcefulness at its best. The aroma of simmering beans and vegetables filled kitchens with a sense of home and security, even when times were hard. Today, this Depression-era bean soup remains a testament to thrifty cooking that doesn't sacrifice flavor or heart. It's a reminder that simple ingredients, slow cooked with care, can create something nourishing and satisfying. Whether served as breakfast or any other meal, it carries the enduring spirit of resilience and the warmth of shared family traditions, proof that even the leanest times can yield rich, comforting food. Johnny cakes with butter. Johnny cakes, a humble and hearty staple, were a beloved breakfast in Depression-era America, especially in rural homes where frugality and resourcefulness ruled the kitchen. These simple cornmeal cakes, crisped on a hot griddle, were inexpensive, filling, and easy to prepare from pantry staples. More than just a breakfast, they were a way to stretch a few basic ingredients into a satisfying start to a hard day. Cornmeal was the star here, a grain both affordable and versatile. During the Depression, families often kept bags of coarse cornmeal on hand, relying on it for everything from porridge to bread. Johnny cakes took this cornmeal and transformed it into something portable, crispy on the outside, tender on the inside, perfect for dipping into whatever sweeteners were available, like butter, honey, or molasses. To make these cakes, dry cornmeal was mixed with water or milk to form a batter just thin enough to spread slightly on a hot, greased griddle or skillet. Salt was added for balance, but sugar was often omitted or used sparingly, as it was a precious commodity. Sometimes a bit of fat, lard, or butter was added to the batter or brushed on the cooking surface to ensure a golden, crunchy crust. The key to perfect Johnny cakes was cooking them over medium heat, allowing the cakes to brown evenly without burning. As the batter hit the hot skillet, it hissed and bubbled, then firmed up into golden discs that were crispy at the edges and chewy in the center. Once cooked, they were stacked high and often served hot, slathered generously with butter that melted into every nook and cranny. If available, a drizzle of molasses or honey added a touch of sweetness that brightened the dense, earthy corn flavor. Johnny cakes were more than just food. They were a link to earlier times and simpler ingredients, a food tradition carried through generations. They required no yeast, no special equipment, and little time, which made them ideal for households juggling scarce resources and busy mornings. And they could be made in large batches, providing leftovers that toasted well or were fried again the next day. Eating Johnny cakes was a tactile experience. The crackle of the crisp edges, the soft, almost creamy inside, the richness of melting butter, and the faintly sweet molasses that lingered on the tongue. This simple breakfast carried the spirit of making do, transforming cornmeal and water into a meal that nourished both body and soul during one of America's toughest chapters. Today, Johnny cakes remain a cherished comfort food. Whether enjoyed plain with butter or dressed up with modern toppings, they remind us that sometimes the most modest recipes hold the richest history, and that frugality, creativity, and love in the kitchen can turn the simplest ingredients into a truly satisfying meal. Depression-era tea cakes. Tea cakes during the Great Depression were a modest but cherished treat. Thin, tender rounds of lightly sweetened dough cooked on a griddle, offering a quick and affordable way to enjoy a comforting bite alongside a morning cup of strong tea or coffee. These cakes were born from necessity, crafted with a handful of pantry staples and a splash of molasses or brown sugar, both prized sweeteners during tough times. The ingredients were simple yet purposeful: flour, baking soda to give the cakes a gentle rise, a pinch of salt, fat, usually lard or butter, and a bit of milk or water to bring the batter together. Molasses or brown sugar lent a deep, earthy sweetness and rich color, elevating the humble tea cake beyond plain bread. Unlike the thicker biscuits and heavier breads common then, tea cakes were thin and tender, designed to cook quickly on a hot griddle. To make tea cakes, the dry ingredients were mixed first, with the fat worked in until the mixture resembled coarse crumbs. This step was crucial for creating a light texture. Then the liquid, often milk or water mixed with a dash of molasses, was stirred in gently to form a soft dough. Overmixing was avoided, as it would toughen the cakes. The dough was rolled or patted out thin, then cut into rounds with a glass or biscuit cutter. The cakes were cooked on a hot, greased griddle or cast iron skillet, flipping once when golden brown spots appeared on the first side. Cooking times were short, just enough to set the dough and develop a tender crumb with a lightly crisp surface. The smell of molasses caramelizing as the cakes cooked filled kitchens with a sense of warmth and simple pleasure. Served warm, tea cakes were often accompanied by a pat of butter or a drizzle of syrup if available. Their delicate sweetness paired perfectly with strong coffee or tea, making them a modest morning luxury during lean times. They were easy to make in batches and could be eaten fresh or stored for a day or two. Depression-era tea cakes embodied the spirit of making much out of little. They remind us that comfort food doesn't have to be elaborate or expensive. Sometimes, it's simply about taking a few basic ingredients and turning them into something that nourishes both body and heart. Even today, these tender, lightly sweetened cakes offer a nostalgic taste of a time when every meal was made with care and resourcefulness. Cold cereal with milk and berries. In the harsh years of the Great Depression, cold cereal as we know it today was still a novelty, but resourceful families found ways to create their own frugal versions using leftover grains, oats, or even homemade toasted flakes. When fresh fruit was scarce and refrigeration limited, wild berries picked in season or preserved fruits became precious additions, bringing bursts of color and sweetness to an otherwise modest bowl. This simple breakfast was a clever and nourishing solution to stretch limited ingredients while offering a refreshing start to the day. Many Depression-era households toasted rolled oats or cracked grains at home to create a crunchy base that resembled modern cereal flakes. This toasting process not only enhanced flavor, but also extended shelf life, allowing families to store these grains and enjoy them cold with milk, usually skim or watered down to make it last longer. Sometimes, the grains were left untoasted and soaked overnight to soften, a technique that saved cooking fuel and prep time. To prepare this breakfast, toasted oats or homemade flakes were placed in a bowl, then topped with cold milk or diluted milk to stretch its use. fresh wild berries, such as blackberries, blueberries, or strawberries. Picked during summer or early fall, were either folded in fresh or preserved from earlier harvests in jams or dried form. The berries added a natural sweetness and a slight tartness that balanced the otherwise plain cereal, making each bite vibrant and satisfying. The beauty of this breakfast was in its adaptability. When fresh berries weren't available, families might substitute with dried fruit or a spoonful of homemade preserves. A sprinkle of sugar was a rare treat, but added when possible. The combination provided much-needed vitamins and fiber, especially important when other fresh foods were limited. This cold cereal with milk and berries was more than a meal. It was a reminder of seasonal rhythms, of making do with nature's offerings, and of the simple joys found in the everyday. It required little time or fuel, making it perfect for busy mornings, and it could be enjoyed by children and adults alike. Today, while store-bought cereals dominate our kitchens, this Depression-era version invites us to reconnect with the basics: whole grains, seasonal fruits, and simple preparation. It's a wholesome, budget-friendly breakfast that honors the resourcefulness of past generations and brings a fresh, nostalgic touch to modern tables. Depression-style pancakes with sour cream. During the Great Depression, when eggs were scarce and expensive, cooks found clever ways to make pancakes rise without them. One such trick was the addition of sour cream or a splash of vinegar, which reacted with baking soda to create light, fluffy pancakes that didn't require the usual egg binder. These pancakes became a breakfast favorite for their tender texture, slight tang, and the way they stretched limited ingredients into a warm, satisfying meal. The main ingredients were simple and often on hand: flour, baking soda or baking powder for leavening, a pinch of salt, sour cream or milk mixed with a little vinegar for acidity, and a touch of sugar or molasses for sweetness. The sour cream, often homemade or saved from cream left over after butter making, added richness and moisture, ensuring the pancakes stayed tender despite the absence of eggs. To prepare these pancakes, dry ingredients were mixed first, then the sour cream or acidic milk was gently folded in, creating a batter thick enough to hold its shape but smooth enough to pour. The magic happened as the acidic component reacted with baking soda, producing bubbles that gave the pancakes their airy lift. Cooking required a hot, greased griddle or skillet. The batter was poured in small rounds and cooked until bubbles formed on the surface, then flipped carefully to brown the other side. The result was stacks of golden pancakes, crisp at the edges and soft in the center, with a slight tang that set them apart from sweeter, richer versions. Serving was simple but special. Pancakes were often topped with syrup, molasses, or a pat of butter. Sometimes preserves or honey were available, adding a splash of sweetness. For many families, these pancakes were a comforting way to start the day, reminding them that even without eggs, breakfast could be warm, filling, and delicious. Today, these Depression-style pancakes remain a testament to kitchen ingenuity. They show us how a little chemistry and a few humble ingredients can come together to create something truly satisfying. Whether you're cooking with limited supplies or just looking for a slightly tangy twist on a classic breakfast, these pancakes are a perfect blend of frugality, flavor, and history. Potato pancakes with onion. Potato pancakes with onion were a Depression-era staple born out of necessity and the desire to transform humble leftovers into a golden, crispy breakfast treat. Potatoes were cheap, filling, and widely available, and turning them into pancakes allowed families to stretch their food supplies while still enjoying something warm, tasty, and satisfying. Adding onions not only enhanced the flavor, but also brought sweetness and aroma that made this simple dish a comforting start to any day. The basic ingredients were straightforward: peeled and grated potatoes, finely chopped onions, a bit of flour to bind, salt for seasoning, and fat, usually lard or bacon grease, for frying. Sometimes a little egg was added when available, but many families made do without. The goal was to create a batter thick enough to hold its shape on the skillet, but light enough to fry to a crispy, golden crust. To prepare, potatoes were peeled and grated by hand, then squeezed tightly to remove excess moisture, which ensured crispier pancakes. Onions were minced finely and combined with the grated potatoes in a bowl. A small amount of flour was mixed in to help bind the mixture together, while salt enhanced the natural flavors. Some cooks added pepper or herbs if they had them, but even the simplest seasoning made a big difference. In a hot skillet filled with rendered fat, spoonfuls of the potato-onion mixture were flattened gently and fried over medium heat until the edges turned golden and crisp. The pancakes were flipped carefully to cook evenly on both sides. The sizzling sound, the aroma of caramelizing onions and frying potatoes, filled kitchens with a sense of warmth and home. Potato pancakes were often served hot and enjoyed plain or with a simple dollop of sour cream or butter when available. Their crispy exterior and tender interior made each bite a delicious contrast of textures. During the Depression, this dish was a thrifty way to enjoy a filling, flavorful breakfast that could be made entirely from pantry staples or leftovers. Today, potato pancakes remain a beloved comfort food across many cultures, celebrated for their simplicity and heartiness. They remind us that even the plainest ingredients, when cooked with care, can become a satisfying and nourishing meal, perfect for cozy mornings and a testament to the resourcefulness of Depression-era cooks. Depression grits with cheese. Grits, a Southern breakfast favorite, became an indispensable staple during the Great Depression. Simple, affordable, and endlessly adaptable. Made from ground corn cooked slowly into a creamy porridge, grits were a thrifty way to fuel families through tough times. Adding cheese when it was available transformed this modest dish into something richer and more satisfying, proving that even in lean years, a little creativity could make a humble meal feel special. The core ingredient, grits, came from coarsely ground corn, which was inexpensive and kept well in storage. Families would simmer the grits gently in water or skim milk, stirring carefully to coax out a smooth, creamy texture. Salt was added for flavor, but beyond that, the dish relied on the slow cooking process to develop a comforting, velvety consistency. For many, grits were a blank canvas, plain enough to be affordable but flexible enough to accept whatever additions a household could spare. Cheese, though not always easy to come by, was a prized addition. Often it was sharp cheddar or whatever leftover cheese was on hand, grated or chopped finely and stirred into the hot grits to melt, adding depth, richness, and a touch of indulgence. Butter was sometimes added as well, enriching the texture and flavor even more. To prepare Depression-era grits with cheese, water, or milk was brought to a gentle boil, then grits were slowly whisked in to avoid lumps. The mixture was simmered over low heat for about 20 to 30 minutes, stirred frequently to prevent sticking. When the grits were thick and creamy, cheese and butter were folded in until melted and incorporated. The final dish was creamy and slightly tangy from the cheese, with a comforting warmth that made it feel like more than just a budget breakfast. This dish was a lifeline during hard times, cheap to make but filling enough to sustain long workdays. Its simple ingredients and slow-cooked nature reminded families that nourishment didn't have to be elaborate to be satisfying. Today, grits with cheese remain a beloved comfort food in the South and beyond. They carry a rich history of resilience and thrift, inviting modern cooks to savor a dish that's both rooted in tradition and adaptable to the pantry's offerings. It's proof that even the humblest ingredients, when prepared with care, can create a breakfast that's hearty, delicious, and timeless. Depression-era coffee cake. Coffee cake, a simple but satisfying baked good, was a Depression-era breakfast staple that brought a little sweetness and warmth to the morning table without breaking the budget. Made from pantry basics like flour, sugar, baking powder, and fat, often lard or butter, this cake was light, tender, and usually topped with a sprinkle of cinnamon sugar for a touch of cozy comfort. It paired perfectly with strong coffee or tea, providing a sweet start to the day when more lavish breakfasts were out of reach. The ingredients were modest but effective. Flour for structure, baking powder to give lift, sugar for sweetness, and fat to keep the crumb tender and moist. Milk or water was used as the liquid, and sometimes a splash of molasses added depth of flavor and a warm amber color. Cinnamon sugar was often sprinkled on top or swirled into the batter, giving the cake a fragrant, sweet crust that made each bite feel special. Making this coffee cake was straightforward. The dry ingredients were mixed first, then the fat was cut or rubbed in until the mixture resembled coarse crumbs. The liquid was added slowly to form a soft batter, which was poured into a greased pan. A generous layer of cinnamon sugar was sprinkled over the top before baking, creating a caramelized, slightly crunchy topping. Baked until golden and fragrant, the cake emerged from the oven with a tender crumb and a lightly crisp cinnamon crust. Its aroma filled the kitchen with warmth, a small but meaningful comfort during difficult times. Coffee cake was a versatile treat. It could be enjoyed plain with a pat of butter or alongside a hot beverage to start the day on a hopeful note. It was often made in larger pans to feed the whole family or cut into squares for packed lunches. Today, Depression-era coffee cake remains a nostalgic favorite, reminding us how a few simple ingredients and a little care can transform humble staples into something deliciously comforting. It's a gentle nod to a past when frugality met warmth, and every meal was an opportunity to nurture both body and soul. Depression, bread pudding with raisins. Bread pudding was a Depression-era hero in kitchens where wasting food was simply not an option. When fresh bread grew stale or leftovers piled up, this humble dessert turned breakfast, transformed day-old bread into a warm, custardy dish full of flavor and comfort. Rich with milk, eggs, sugar, and raisins, often the only sweet treat many families could afford, bread pudding was a thrifty way to stretch limited ingredients into something nourishing and satisfying. At its heart, bread pudding was a simple recipe born out of necessity. Stale bread was torn or cut into chunks and soaked in a mixture of milk and eggs, which acted as a binding custard. Sugar was added sparingly to bring sweetness, while raisins, either dried fruit preserved from better harvests or traded in small amounts, provided bursts of chewy sweetness throughout the pudding. Cinnamon or nutmeg, when available, added a warm spice note that elevated this modest dish. Preparation began by warming milk and mixing it with beaten eggs, sugar, and spices. The bread was soaked thoroughly in this mixture, absorbing the liquid and becoming soft and custardy. Raisins were folded in, and the entire mixture was poured into a buttered baking dish. Then the pudding was baked gently until golden on top and set inside, with the edges crisping slightly to create a delightful contrast of textures. The aroma that filled Depression kitchens was one of warmth and sweetness, a rare but welcome luxury during hard times. Bread pudding was often served warm, sometimes with a drizzle of syrup, a splash of cream, or a pat of butter, turning leftover bread into a breakfast fit for a family seeking comfort and sustenance. This dish exemplified Depression-era resourcefulness, a way to avoid waste, maximize flavor, and nourish hungry mouths with simple ingredients. Today, bread pudding remains a beloved classic, reminding us how food traditions born from thrift and necessity can become timeless comforts. It's a delicious testament to making the most of what you have and turning scarcity into sweetness. Skillet fried eggs and tomatoes. In Depression-era kitchens, breakfast was often a lesson in simplicity and making the most of what was on hand. Skillet fried eggs and tomatoes perfectly captured this spirit, a dish that combined inexpensive, readily available ingredients into a satisfying, flavorful meal. Eggs provided precious protein, while tomatoes added juiciness and a touch of acidity that brightened the plate without adding cost. Eggs, when affordable and available, were highly prized, often sourced from backyard hens or local farms. Tomatoes, whether fresh in season, canned, or even garden-grown, were a common staple that could stretch meals and add vital vitamins. Cooking them together in a skillet with a bit of fat turned these basic ingredients into a hearty breakfast that was both nourishing and delicious. To prepare, a generous spoonful of cooking fat or lard was heated in a skillet. Thick slices of tomato were laid in the hot fat and fried gently until they softened, releasing their juices and caramelizing slightly on the edges. Then, eggs were cracked directly into the skillet alongside or on top of the tomatoes. The eggs cooked sunny side up, their whites setting while the yolks remained runny and rich. Salt and pepper, when available, seasoned the dish simply, allowing the fresh flavors to shine. The finished plate was a colorful, inviting mix. The bright red tomatoes warmed and slightly sweetened, the eggs golden with luscious yolks ready to be dipped with crusty bread or toast. This meal was quick to prepare, packed with nutrition, and required very few ingredients, making it a Depression-era favorite. Eating skillet fried eggs and tomatoes was a comforting ritual, a small indulgence in hard times. It reminded families that even with limited means, breakfast could be fresh, flavorful, and sustaining. Today, the dish remains a simple pleasure, nostalgic, hearty, and a beautiful example of how humble ingredients can come together to create something greater than the sum of their parts. Depression. Oatcakes with honey. Oatcakes were a staple in many Depression-era kitchens, prized for their simplicity, affordability, and satisfying texture. These flat, crisp rounds made from oats and flour offered a versatile breakfast or snack that could be enjoyed plain or dressed up with a drizzle of honey or a pat of butter. In a time when every ingredient was precious, oatcakes made the most of humble grains and pantry staples to create something hearty and nourishing. The basic ingredients were straightforward: rolled oats or oat flour, a bit of wheat flour for structure, baking powder for a light lift, salt for balance, and fat, often lard or butter, to bind the dough and add richness. Honey, usually a scarce but treasured sweetener, was reserved for special occasions or used sparingly to enhance the cake's natural nuttiness. To prepare oatcakes, the dry ingredients were mixed thoroughly, then the fat was rubbed in until the mixture resembled coarse crumbs. Liquid, water, or milk was added slowly to form a soft dough that could be rolled out without sticking. The dough was rolled thin and cut into rounds or shapes, then baked in a hot oven or cooked on a griddle until golden and crisp. These oatcakes were crunchy on the outside with a tender crumb inside, their nutty oat flavor shining through. Served warm and brushed with honey, they became a sweet yet wholesome breakfast that was both satisfying and frugal. They could also be stored for several days, making them convenient for busy households. Oatcakes were more than just food. They were a testament to Depression-era ingenuity and thrift. They made the most of inexpensive ingredients and could be adapted to suit what was available. Today, oatcakes remain a comforting reminder of a time when simple, hearty food brought families together. They continue to be enjoyed as a wholesome, budget-friendly breakfast or snack that connects us to the resourcefulness and warmth of the past. Depression-style cornmeal pancakes. Cornmeal pancakes were a beloved breakfast during the Great Depression, a frugal and flavorful way to stretch limited resources without sacrificing taste or comfort. Using coarse cornmeal as the primary ingredient, these pancakes offered a hearty texture and a subtle nutty flavor that set them apart from the usual wheat flour varieties. They were inexpensive, simple to prepare, and filled hungry bellies with satisfying warmth. The recipe called for basic ingredients: cornmeal, a small amount of wheat flour for structure, baking soda to help them rise, salt and liquid, usually milk or water. A bit of fat, like lard or melted butter, was often added to enrich the batter. These pancakes were thicker and more rustic than their fluffy wheat counterparts, with a golden crust that held a tender, slightly grainy interior. To make Depression-style cornmeal pancakes, the dry ingredients were whisked together first. The liquid was added slowly, stirring until the batter was smooth but thick enough to hold its shape on a hot griddle or skillet. Cooking required moderate heat to avoid burning the coarse cornmeal. Pancakes were cooked until bubbles appeared on the surface and edges set, then flipped carefully to brown evenly. The result was a stack of golden pancakes, slightly crisp on the outside with a hearty, comforting chew. They were often served with whatever sweeteners were on hand: molasses, syrup, or a pat of butter. These pancakes offered a satisfying, budget-friendly breakfast that could feed the family without requiring expensive ingredients. Cornmeal pancakes were a testament to Depression-era ingenuity, showing how basic pantry staples could be turned into a warm, delicious meal. They connected families to a food tradition rooted in thrift and flavor, one that celebrated the humble cornmeal's ability to nourish body and soul alike. Today, these pancakes remain a nostalgic favorite for those who appreciate old-fashioned cooking and simple, hearty breakfasts. Their rich history and enduring flavor remind us that sometimes the simplest meals carry the deepest stories. Depression buckwheat pancakes with syrup. Buckwheat pancakes were a hearty and economical breakfast favorite during the Great Depression, prized for their nutty flavor and filling nature. Buckwheat flour, often grown locally or purchased cheaply, was a smart alternative to wheat flour, making these pancakes a popular choice in rural kitchens where every penny mattered. Their robust taste and dense texture helped fuel hard-working families through tough days. The ingredients were straightforward: buckwheat flour, baking soda for leavening, salt, and buttermilk or milk mixed with a bit of vinegar or sour cream to add acidity and tenderness. The slight tang from the dairy complemented the earthy buckwheat flavor, making these pancakes stand out from sweeter wheat versions. Molasses or syrup was often served alongside, adding just enough sweetness to balance the pancake's rustic profile. To prepare buckwheat pancakes, dry ingredients were combined first, then wet ingredients were stirred in gently to form a thick batter. Care was taken not to overmix, preserving a tender crumb. Cooking required a well-heated griddle greased lightly with fat, where spoonfuls of batter were poured and cooked until bubbles formed on the surface before flipping to brown the other side. The finished pancakes were darker than their wheat cousins, with a slightly coarse texture and a hearty, satisfying chew. Served hot and drizzled with molasses or syrup, they made a filling and flavorful breakfast that was affordable and easy to prepare. Buckwheat pancakes embodied Depression-era thrift and resilience, a way to turn inexpensive, locally available ingredients into a meal that nourished body and spirit. Today, these pancakes remain a beloved regional favorite, connecting us to a rich food tradition and reminding us that flavor and frugality can happily coexist on the breakfast plate. Depression-era grape juice and water. During the Great Depression, fresh fruit juices were a luxury most families couldn't afford regularly. Instead, a popular and affordable morning drink was diluted grape juice, made from either homegrown grapes or canned grape concentrate. This simple beverage was tart, sweet, and refreshing, a practical way to enjoy the essence of fruit without the expense or spoilage concerns of fresh produce. The basic preparation was straightforward. Families kept jars or cans of concentrated grape juice, often a deep purple syrup packed with flavor and nutrients, on hand. When morning came, a small amount of this concentrate was diluted generously with water to create a lightly sweetened drink that was both thirst-quenching and nourishing. Sometimes sugar was added if it was available, but the natural sugars in the concentrate often provided enough sweetness. This grape juice cocktail was usually served chilled or at room temperature, depending on the season and household resources. For many, it was a bright spot in a frugal breakfast, offering vitamins and a burst of fruity flavor to complement simpler staples like bread, biscuits, or porridge. It was also a way to preserve summer's bounty through the lean winter months, a testament to the careful planning and resourcefulness that defined Depression kitchens. The drink was easy to make, required no cooking, and could be stretched to serve multiple family members. Its vibrant color and sweet tart taste were small pleasures that helped lift spirits during challenging times. Today, diluted grape juice may seem humble, but it carries the legacy of a time when every ingredient was valued and preserved with care. It reminds us that even the simplest refreshments can offer comfort, nutrition, and a taste of history, a perfect start to any frugal breakfast table. Depression rice pudding. Rice pudding was a cherished breakfast and dessert during the Great Depression, prized for its simplicity, affordability, and comforting warmth. Made from inexpensive rice cooked slowly in milk with just a touch of sugar and cinnamon, this creamy pudding provided a sweet and filling start to the day without relying on costly or scarce ingredients. Rice was a pantry staple that lasted long and filled bellies with slow-burning carbohydrates. Families often stretched their limited milk supply by simmering rice in skim or watered-down milk, stirring gently to coax out a luscious, creamy texture. A pinch of salt balanced the sweetness, while cinnamon added a fragrant warmth that made each spoonful feel special, even in tough times. To prepare rice pudding, rice was cooked slowly in milk over low heat, stirring frequently to prevent sticking and to encourage a smooth consistency. Sugar was added sparingly to sweeten, and cinnamon was stirred in near the end to infuse the pudding with its cozy spice. The result was a thick, creamy dish that was both soothing and satisfying. Depression-era cooks valued rice pudding for its versatility. It could be served warm as a nourishing breakfast or chilled as a simple dessert. Its ingredients were affordable, and its preparation required little more than patience and care. The comforting aroma of cinnamon and sweetened milk would fill kitchens, offering a rare moment of indulgence and hope. Rice pudding was a reminder that even in lean times, simple ingredients prepared with love could create warmth and joy. Today, rice pudding remains a nostalgic favorite, rich with history, easy to make, and delicious. It connects us to a time when resourcefulness was essential, and when a humble bowl of creamy rice could be a sweet start to the day or a gentle end to a long one. Depression-style toasted bread and butter. In the lean years of the Great Depression, sometimes the simplest foods were the most treasured. Toasted bread and butter was one such humble breakfast staple, a warm, crispy slice of bread, toasted over a fire or stove and generously spread with butter or lard. Though it might seem plain by today's standards, this straightforward combination offered comfort, sustenance, and a small daily luxury when ingredients were scarce. Bread, often homemade or purchased fresh but rationed carefully, was a foundational food. When sliced and toasted, it transformed from soft and perishable to crisp and longer lasting. The toasting process brought out a nutty aroma and added texture, making even the plainest loaf feel special. Butter or lard, precious fats that were carefully rationed or produced at home, added richness and moisture, making the toast more filling and flavorful. To prepare, slices of bread were placed near an open flame, on a wire rack, or in a skillet to toast evenly until golden brown and crisp. Butter was spread immediately while the bread was still hot, melting into the porous crumb and creating a glossy, savory coating. Sometimes, a sprinkle of salt or a touch of sugar was added if available, enhancing the flavor. This simple breakfast was often enjoyed alongside a cup of strong coffee or tea, providing a quick and satisfying start to the day. It required minimal ingredients, little preparation time, and no special tools. Perfect for households coping with limited resources and busy schedules. Depression-era toasted bread and butter remind us that comfort often lies in simplicity. It speaks to a time when families cherished what they had, turning the everyday into something nourishing and grounding. Today, it remains a nostalgic favorite, proof that even the most basic ingredients, prepared with care, can provide warmth, satisfaction, and a touch of homemade goodness to start the morning right. Depression-era cinnamon toast. Cinnamon toast was a simple yet beloved breakfast treat during the Great Depression, a quick way to turn everyday bread into something special and comforting. When fresh ingredients were scarce and luxuries few, this sweet, aromatic toast brought a bit of warmth and joy to the morning table without requiring much more than bread, butter, cinnamon, and sugar. The ingredients were modest but effective. Slices of bread, usually homemade or purchased fresh but carefully rationed, were toasted over the stove or fire until crisp and golden. Butter or lard, a precious fat, was spread generously over the hot toast, melting into every crumb and adding richness. A sprinkle of cinnamon mixed with sugar was then dusted on top, creating a fragrant, sweet crust that made this simple food feel like a treat. Preparation was straightforward. Bread was toasted until just crisp enough to hold the toppings without sogging, then buttered while still warm. The cinnamon-sugar mixture was sprinkled evenly, sometimes pressed lightly to help it stick. The result was a crunchy, sweet slice of toast with the warm spice of cinnamon complementing the buttery richness. For many families, cinnamon toast was a small luxury, a way to brighten a humble breakfast and provide a satisfying start to the day. Its familiar aroma filled kitchens with a sense of comfort and routine, a little moment of sweetness amidst the challenges of the era. Today, cinnamon toast remains a nostalgic favorite and a quick, budget-friendly breakfast option. It reminds us that even the simplest ingredients, combined with a bit of care, can create warmth, flavor, and a sense of home. This modest dish stands as a testament to the enduring power of comfort food, especially in hard times. Depression fried hominy cakes. Fried hominy cakes were a favorite frugal breakfast during the Great Depression, especially in southern kitchens where hominy, a corn product, was abundant and affordable. Hominy cakes were a clever way to transform this simple staple into crispy, flavorful patties that stretched meals and satisfied hungry families without costing much. Hominy, made by soaking dried corn kernels in a lye or lime solution to remove the hull, was often canned or dried and used as a versatile ingredient. During the Depression, it was an accessible source of calories and fiber, and turning it into fried cakes added texture and variety to the morning table. The cakes were crispy on the outside, soft and tender inside, making them a delicious, inexpensive breakfast treat. To prepare, canned or cooked dried hominy was mashed roughly with a fork or spoon and combined with a bit of flour and salt to help bind the mixture. Some cooks added a pinch of pepper or onion powder if available, but the cakes were often seasoned simply. The mixture was shaped into small patties, then fried in hot fat or lard until golden brown and crispy on both sides. These hominy cakes were served hot, often alongside eggs, syrup, or molasses, and sometimes with butter. Their mild corn flavor and crispy texture made them a satisfying accompaniment or even a standalone breakfast. In tough times, fried hominy cakes embodied the spirit of making do, turning inexpensive pantry staples into filling, tasty food. Their ease of preparation and affordability made them a go-to dish for families trying to stretch every ingredient. Today, fried hominy cakes remain a beloved traditional dish in many Southern households, a tasty reminder of Depression-era resourcefulness and a celebration of humble ingredients turned into comforting, crispy goodness. Depression steamed cream of wheat. Cream of wheat, a finely ground wheat cereal, was a popular breakfast choice during the Great Depression, prized for its affordability, ease of preparation, and nourishing qualities. This simple porridge, steamed or cooked slowly in water or milk, offered a warm, creamy start to the day, filling enough to sustain families through hard work and lean times. The basic ingredients were few: cream of wheat cereal, water or milk, often skimmed or watered down to make it last, and a pinch of salt to balance the flavor. Sometimes a bit of butter or syrup was added to enrich the dish and add sweetness, but even plain, cream of wheat was a comforting and wholesome option. To prepare, the cereal was slowly stirred into boiling water or milk, then cooked over low heat with constant stirring to prevent lumps and achieve a smooth, creamy consistency. This slow cooking process was essential to coax the best texture from the finely ground wheat, resulting in a thick, velvety porridge. Once cooked, the cream of wheat was ladled into bowls and often topped with a pat of butter that melted slowly into the hot cereal. A drizzle of syrup or a sprinkle of sugar, when available, added sweetness and a hint of indulgence. The dish was served steaming hot, making it a perfect comfort food on chilly mornings. Cream of wheat was a Depression-era staple because it was inexpensive, nutritious, and easy to prepare in large quantities. Its mild flavor made it versatile, allowing families to stretch their meager food supplies while still enjoying a filling and warm breakfast. Today, steamed cream of wheat remains a nostalgic favorite, connecting us to a simpler time when meals were made with care, thrift, and a deep sense of resourcefulness. It continues to be a gentle, satisfying way to start the day, reminding us that sometimes the simplest dishes offer the most comfort. Applesauce with toast. Applesauce was a comforting and economical staple during the Great Depression, often made from leftover or slightly bruised apples that might otherwise have gone to waste. Slow-cooked and gently sweetened, it provided a naturally sweet accompaniment to breakfast, especially when paired with crispy toasted bread or biscuits. This simple dish brought a touch of homemade warmth and flavor to mornings when fresh fruit was scarce and budgets tight. The preparation began by peeling, coring, and chopping apples, sometimes a mix of tart and sweet varieties, to ensure a balanced flavor. The apples were then simmered slowly with a little water and a pinch of cinnamon if available, until they broke down into a soft, chunky sauce. Sugar was added sparingly or omitted altogether, depending on the household's means and preference. The result was a naturally sweet, fragrant applesauce that preserved the essence of the harvest season. Serving applesauce with warm toasted bread or biscuits made for a satisfying breakfast pairing. The bread was often homemade or day-old, toasted until golden and crisp, providing a crunchy contrast to the soft, sweet applesauce. Butter or lard might be spread on the toast, soaking up the fruity juices and adding richness. This breakfast was prized for its simplicity and thrift. It turned modest ingredients into a flavorful meal that filled bellies and warmed hearts. Applesauce offered vitamins and natural sweetness at a time when fresh fruit was a rare treat, making it a cherished part of Depression-era kitchens. Today, applesauce with toast remains a nostalgic reminder of resilience and resourcefulness. It celebrates the beauty of seasonal cooking and the joy of simple, honest food, proof that even the humblest dishes can bring comfort and a taste of home. As we close the chapter on these 30 frugal breakfasts from the Great Depression, it's impossible not to feel a deep sense of respect and wonder for the resilience, creativity, and quiet strength of the families who first brought these dishes to life. These meals were born in a time when every crumb mattered, every penny counted, and food was more than sustenance. It was a symbol of survival, family, and hope. Back then, the world looked very different. The kitchen wasn't just a place to prepare meals, it was a workshop of ingenuity. There were no grocery aisles brimming with exotic ingredients, no quick-fix breakfasts wrapped in plastic or ready to pop in a microwave. Instead, there were cast-iron skillets, pantry staples like cornmeal and dried beans, and resourceful hands that transformed simple, everyday ingredients into meals that fueled long days and held families together. Each dish we explored today carries the imprint of those hard times, from the crispy edges of skillet cornbread kissed by molasses, to the creamy comfort of oat porridge dotted with dried apples, to the golden stacks of buckwheat pancakes drizzled with syrup. Each recipe tells a story of making do, of finding joy in the humble, and of turning scarcity into satisfaction. What strikes me most is how these recipes embody a kind of quiet pride. They didn't shout their worth or demand attention. They simply did their job well, nourishing bodies and warming hearts when the world felt uncertain and harsh. They remind us that comfort food doesn't have to be fancy or expensive. Sometimes it's the simplest things, the crackle of toasted bread, the gentle sweetness of stewed prunes, the hearty warmth of fried potatoes and onions, that provide the deepest comfort. It's humbling to think that these dishes were often made with leftovers or scraps, food preserved through careful planning or salvaged from small harvests. In those kitchens, nothing was wasted. Bread that was a day old became pudding. Potatoes became pancakes. A little dried beef transformed into a creamy sauce that stretched a meal into a feast. That resourcefulness, that respect for every ingredient, is a lesson worth remembering. And here's the beautiful irony. These recipes, rooted in hardship, still work wonderfully today. Their simplicity fits perfectly into modern lives that crave quick, budget-friendly meals without sacrificing flavor or heart. They offer more than just nostalgia. They offer practical, wholesome options for anyone wanting to slow down, savor their food, and cook with intention. In our fast-paced world of convenience foods and elaborate recipes, there's something grounding about returning to these Depression-era breakfasts. They remind us to appreciate the basics, to savor the golden crust of cornbread, to enjoy the cozy warmth of a bowl of porridge, and to find comfort in foods that carry the weight of history and tradition. These meals bring us back to the kitchen table, where family, conversation, and a good meal are what truly matter. And while we may no longer face the same challenges those Depression-era cooks did, the spirit of their cooking lives on in every kitchen where care, thrift, and love go into preparing food. Whether you're a seasoned home cook or just starting out, these recipes invite you to connect with the past, honor the resourcefulness of generations before us, and bring a bit of that enduring warmth and simplicity into your own mornings. So as you consider trying these dishes at home, remember this. You're not just cooking, you're participating in a tradition of resilience and heart. You're tasting history, one bite at a time, and you're joining millions who found sustenance, hope, and comfort in these very same humble breakfasts. If there's one takeaway from all of this, it's that good food doesn't have to be complicated or costly. Sometimes, the most memorable meals come from the fewest ingredients and the most caring hands. So dust off your cast iron skillet, stir that pot of porridge, and savor the honest flavors of a time when every bite told a story. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Depression-era breakfasts, meals that sustained a nation and continue to inspire cooks today. If you try any of these recipes, I'd love to hear about your experience and any family stories they might bring up. Food has a wonderful way of connecting us across generations, and sharing those stories keeps the legacy alive. Until next time, keep your kitchens warm, your ingredients simple, and your hearts full. Here's to cooking with thrift, love, and a taste of history.